If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And please join me on my website at nanice.com. Thank you.
It's your time for Chai with Nanice. Get ready for substance, clarity, change, and especially empowerment. Get ready to turn over stones, uncover stories, and get to the heart of the matter in every area of your life. Any mood runs, any emotion flies, and your dreams are within your grasp. There are no limits or boundaries, and your comfort zone is out of reach, yet it's the safest place you will ever be. Come in, sit down, and have some chai with Nanice.
I'm Nanice. Just a few weeks ago, I had a revolutionary epiphany. Suddenly, I became aware that I was not separate from nature, that I was actually part of nature. That in fact, that the same vein of life that runs through every flower and every drop of water and every tree and every bird, for that matter, actually runs through me. That I wasn't a visitor to this planet, and I wasn't separate from this planet, that I was actually a part of this planet. And as Mother Nature governs everything on this planet, she also, in some very beautiful and universal ways, governs me as well. And if I am part of nature, and Earth is part of the universe, then it only makes sense that I'm also part of that universal vein, that pulse that runs through the entire universe. It helped me get to a greater level of really knowing that I'm one with all. And a peace came through me that was much deeper than I ever experienced before. Suddenly, this idea of oneness didn't stop at an idea. It reached into my cells, really knowing that I was one with all. Shortly after that, I discovered Michael Dowd, who is my amazing guest today. And his work fits right in with this concept that we all are one, and that there is a trusting universe, and that there is a greater meaning to life, and we are all part of that meaning. And in fact, we help create that meaning. I invite you to sit down, relax, take off some old beliefs, and try on some new ones, because today we're talking about the evolution of God and how it affects humanity, and in fact, how you affect the evolution of God. Now, is that an exciting topic or what? I sure can't wait. So about Michael. Well, Michael, he's a reverend, and he is America's evolutionary evangelist. I know I'm just botched up that word. Sorry, Michael. And preaches a gospel billions of years old. He integrates science and spirituality is what being called religion 2.0, or evolution theology. Oh, I like that, evolution theology. Reverend Dowd's message gives voice to the millions in the middle who see no conflict between religion and reason. Secular and religious audiences alike are embracing his call to accept evolution and live in integrity, which he says means coming into right relationship with reality, or getting right with God. Getting right with God. Speaking to audiences ranging from Baptists to Buddhists, Michael shares a God's eye view of everything from microbes to supernovas. Awestruck audience across America are wowed by David's mind-blowing, heart-opening, and often life-changing presentations that show how only accepting and celebrating evolution can assure humanity's salvation. He is also the author of this amazing book called Thank God for Evolution. I totally recommend it. It's a really extraordinary and revolutionary book. So, Michael, thank you for joining me today. Thanks for having chai with me.
Thank you, Nanice.
This is quite a body of work that you've put together. I'm totally impressed. And I guess the first question that I have for you, so what does it mean to get right with God, or get into the right relationship with reality? What does that mean?
Well, it's meant different things throughout human history because reality has been different. In other words, when we lived in tribes, and that was the extent of our cooperation, reality was in fact different and was experienced as different than it was when we started living in chiefdoms and kingdoms, or then later when we began to live in early nations and empires and so on. So we've seen a complexity of consciousness, a complexity of culture. And So how do we be in right relationship with reality has been a fundamental question that every society has needed to address. In other words, being in right relationship with reality, for example, one of the things is to not despoil your environment. One of the things is how do we be in right relationship with each other in our tribe or our community or our nation or whatever. What are the factors that go into allowing us to trust each other, to cooperate with each other, to punish or in some way deal with those who transgress and are self-centered and seek their own good at the expense of others or at the expense of the whole. And so being in right relationship with reality is always going to be a collective endeavor. In other words, it's a matter of our best collective intelligence at that time in history. And so now and traditionally that's been talked about in religious language. So being in right relationship with reality has typically been talked about in terms of, recognizing your oneness with the goddess or being, in right relationship with God. All the different religious traditions speak about it in similar language, using divine, you could say personifications of ultimacy, of reality. And now we find ourselves not only with practically true answers. See, all religions have had practically true answers. That is, if you take their beliefs literally, you are able to live in right relationship with reality as experienced in that culture. And you've been able to have the emotional states that human beings have always needed to thrive. States like trust when you look to the future, gratitude when you look to the past, inspiration to be in action in the moment, no matter what the challenges or difficulties you'll be facing. And now we have not only practically true ways of addressing those, but we have factually true. And that's one of the great gifts of the worldwide self-correcting scientific enterprise, is it now has given us factually true answers to some of the biggest questions, who are we, where did we come from, why are we here, these kinds of things. But a lot of people have never been exposed to an inspiring, soul-nourishing way of thinking about science and of thinking about the discoveries of science. And so it's just a terribly exciting time to be alive, to be at this time when people are realizing that the evolutionary history of the universe can be understood in a deeply inspiring way that, in fact, does give us great trust and gratitude and inspiration, and does so not at the expense of the religious traditions, but in a way that helps the religions themselves evolve.
Oh, that's so beautiful. So I think I hear you saying that to be in a right relationship with reality is also getting right with God. And is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And I love that, because a lot of people, when they think about getting right with God or in a relationship with God, they think that it's such a intrinsic experience that they go within. And I had an amazing woman on my show a few months ago, Ellis, and she was in a coma for like 10 years, and she talks about this experience of being in this coma, and the only relationship she had was with God, and that was beautiful and amazing. And true, I do believe that we need to go outside. But go inside. But I love what you're saying, because what you're saying is that it's not just inside, it's outside. And that if we're not in a right relationship with other people, if we're not in a right relationship with our community or what's going on around us, then we're also not in relationship with our divine God. And this goes right into we see these wars over, religions, or even, wars within families, father against son, or husband against wife, or siblings against siblings. And maybe they have different beliefs about their God, about their spirituality, and they fight against each other, thinking that, I have to fight against this person or this group of people so that I can be right about my beliefs about God. And in effect, what they're really doing is they're separating themselves from God because they're separating themselves from others.
Exactly. Nanice, your introduction was actually extraordinary. I look forward to listening to the recording of this, because you really hit the nail on the head, and in a way that you just touched also on here, which is to be in right relationship with reality is to recognize that reality is complex, to recognize that it's not just our beliefs. I mean, this is the interesting thing. When you think historically, all cultures or all people have ever had in ways of helping them be in right relationship with reality was beliefs until very recently. Because, if you lived 500 years ago or 5,000 years ago or 15,000 years ago, what was the nature of reality? Well, people told stories that were practically real. That is, that they were the best understanding at that time of the nature of reality, both inner reality, our inner subjective experience, as well as outer reality, the cult, the environment that we lived in. And of course, reality is very different in jungles than it is in the mountains or in desert plains and that sort of thing. So reality was experienced differently. So of course, we see different metaphors, different analogies being used for God, for ultimacy. And so all people had was belief. So, if you whatever your tribe, your elders, your parents taught you, you needed to believe. And there's good evolutionary reasons that we're like sponges as children. We will believe whatever is taught to us by our trusted elders. I mean, if kids didn't do that, those kids wouldn't have survived for most of human history. And now we're finally at this place where we can move beyond beliefs, where we can still value beliefs, but not taking them literally, because prior to, say, the last couple hundred years, we couldn't have possibly had a factually true, a naturally true understanding of things. And so people often think of the supernatural, but really almost all supernatural stories are pre-natural. That before we could have possibly had a natural understanding. And now we have a naturalized understanding that can validate and actually give us a deeper appreciation of ancient religious insights, but can unite us as an entire species, so we don't have to be at war with each other over our differing beliefs, because we can move beyond beliefs to knowledge, to experience, to knowing of our, as you said, oneness with reality, that we are the universe becoming conscious of itself.
So it sounds like you're saying that knowledge helps to facilitate harmony. Because in the past we had to guess, we're guessing, we're making things up, like this is what this is, that's what this is, and now we have so much scientific knowledge that that it doesn't just change our view of reality now, that it actually changes our history. And it's interesting because yesterday I went for a hike by myself up in Bell Canyon here, and I met this man up on top of a rock, and he was up there all by himself and invited me up, and we ended up in this like 2 or 3 hour conversation. It was incredible, which I love those connections. And he was telling me about a situation with his dad, and we got into it a little bit, and I just offered some insight, and suddenly he had these epiphanies about his dad's past. And by understanding his dad's past, it changed the whole picture, and the thing that he was so upset about with his dad no longer existed, because now he had a new picture of reality. And what it reminded me of is, we thought the Earth was flat for a really, really long time. And then suddenly one day, we discovered the Earth is round. And that didn't just change that moment, and it didn't just change the future. It changed the past, because now all the history and all the books that had talked about, the Earth being flat, suddenly that was changed. So history in the past was changed. So we're not just affecting now and the future, we're actually affecting the past, and in some ways that I cannot put into words or will even dare to try, that actually ripples forward. So it's like all the disharmony that existed in the past because of a false belief in reality or an incongruent belief in reality shifts. Forgiveness happens on many, many levels. Forgiveness, when I talk about forgiveness, wrong thinking has been corrected into right thinking, again, getting right with reality, getting right with God, getting right with each other, and suddenly harmony comes into balance. And to me, what that looks like is that the universe is always working towards harmony, and it doesn't just work forwards, it works backwards too, and really it could be no other way. And so, Michael, are you there?
Hi. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened, because it just all of a sudden the line went dead, and I didn't. Anyway, I'm glad we're reconnected.
You know what? The universe has its own mind, and I learned a long time ago with technology not to argue with it. It knows exactly what it's doing. And
that's a very healthy attitude. That's great.
Yes.
So
well,
you were in the process of telling me about your interaction with this guy and what a difference it made for him. Yes.
Yes. So did you hear the part about the world being round?
No.
Okay. So And I apologize to the listeners who already heard this, but it probably turned out different this time anyway. So maybe that was the point. So what I thought of as he realized this knowledge that he had about his father was incorrect from the past. Suddenly, this forgiveness happened, where the thing that he was mad at didn't exist anymore, because now he had an understanding of the past, which changed the present and the future. And it made me think of, for so long, we thought that the world was flat, and we wrote about it, and we passed it on through generations, and we believed the world was flat. And then one day, suddenly, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt by experience, just like science is revealing this new experience of what's real and what's not, we know that the world is round. And so it didn't just change that present and the future, it actually rippled back to the past. And what I mean by that...
Really, that's profound.
All books had to change. All the books that were in the world is flat. Well, no, that's not true. That doesn't exist anymore. And in that way, it has to ripple forward, because we're actually healing the past, changing the information, and that ripples forward, completely changing the past and the future. I mean, the past, present, and future. And it's like the universe is moving towards harmony, not just in a direction of forward, but it's moving in harmony in direction of past, because the past gets changed first, and then the future changes as a result of it. And I said that completely different than I did the first time, I'm sure.
Well, I found that to be very insightful. I, to be honest with you, I've never quite thought about it in those terms, and yet I think you're absolutely right on, because that's been true with my own experience. I remember my relationship to my father shifted radically when there were two things. One is that I wrote him a letter of gratitude. I had seen this teaching on a DVD where somebody, this woman had basically been convinced that sharing gratitude with someone can make a difference in their life. And so she went to her boss. She'd been working for a newspaper for 15 years and basically just told her boss all the things she was grateful for. And the boss kept thinking he was being buttered up for something, but when it became clear to him that she wasn't buttering him up for anything, he was blown out of the water, and it transformed. And he went to her later, and he said that in some weird way, you've just validated what I've been doing for the last 40 years. Nobody has ever done what you've just done. Wow. And I was really struck by that. So I wrote a letter to my father, where I wrote a 17-page letter, handwritten, where I just went through my entire life, and every memory that I could think of that was really meaningful to me that I had never thanked him for, I just thanked him for it. And I was blown out. I was completely unprepared for the fact that this letter would be bathed in my tears. And then when I sent it to my dad, I found out a week and a half later that it had the same effect on him, and that was really transformational. The other thing that happened, though, was when my daughter, who's now 27, when she was an infant, she was about 2 or 3 weeks old, and I was looking at her in the crib, and I was standing over her, and all of a sudden I realized, because I was thinking, I don't have any idea what I'm doing in terms of parenting, and all of a sudden it dawned on me, neither did my parents. And this wave of compassion, and it really transformed my past. It transformed all my thinking, and some of the resentment that I'd had and some of the judgments that I had about my dad, they just evaporated. They just went away. And so in a very real sense, it was the knowledge that new parents really don't know what they're doing in most cases. That knowledge transformed how I thought and felt about my dad, so it did transform the past.
Wow, that is so beautiful. That is so
and
beautiful.
I think that's also happened for me in terms of I used to actually be judgmental about religious differences and why religious people didn't like each other and why some of them were out to kill each other and stuff. And now I understand it from an evolutionary perspective, and it's like, oh, of course. So I find that I now have compassion where before I had judgment.
That is so very beautiful. Wow. Yes. So when you say in your book evolution is happening through us now, it applies to this as well.
Absolutely.
That new awarenesses. Every time we have a new awareness is our epiphany that we're not just evolving, but that others around us are evolving, because that affected when you wrote that letter. That affected not just the person it was written to, but his energy and people around him, and all these things. And it's like when you had this epiphany about your parents, suddenly that your energy towards them changed. So it has to trigger or change something in their their cellular memory or their DNA or their energetic field, and that has to ripple back.
Yeah. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I think 3 weeks ago, I was preaching a sermon on gratitude. And because Connie and I have been living on the road for 8 years, we've permanently traveled North America, and so we've spoken to almost 1,100 different groups. So every Sunday I'm in a different church, and usually during the week I'm also doing evening programs for different churches. And anyway, I was at a church about 3 weeks ago, and I was preaching on gratitude, and I told that story. And there was a woman who came to my Wednesday evening program. She had been in church on Sunday. She'd heard me sell that, and she told the story. She came up to me, and she said that she had, a few years ago, written her father a similar letter, and he was this rather proper Bostonian. She had never seen emotion. She had never heard him ever say, "I love you," in her whole life. And he was now in his 70s by this time, or maybe 80s. And she wrote him this letter and just, went through and thanked him and didn't focus on any of the things that weren't positive, basically, because, people always have a mixed impact on other people. That's just part of what it is to be human. And so she didn't focus on any of the negative stuff or neutral stuff. She just went through and thanked him for everything she could authentically thank him for. And he responded in such an emotional way that she said was so uncharacteristic of anything she had ever experienced with him. And he said, "I've been waiting," and he got choked up when he said this. He said, "I've been waiting for this kind of communication from you all of my life." It did. So it transformed him as well as her and as well as the past. So that's, and again, that's part of coming into right relationship with reality. See, my understanding of reality is that we're all doing the best we can, given what we've got to work with. In other words, given our internal and external resources available to us, we're all pretty much doing the best we can, given what we've got to work with. Now, that's not true of 100% of the people. There are roughly 1.5% of the human population that are born without the ability to feel empathy or compassion. We call those people sociopaths or psychopaths. So yes, there are people that may be just totally intent on manipulating.
But they're doing the best they can.
Absolutely. Good point.
It's like my 5-month-old grandson. He's doing the best he can, And maybe when we look at a bigger picture, somebody like a sociopath actually plays a divine part, that he or she actually brings lessons and experiences to the people around him, and he's actually, or she's actually of service instead of like a detriment to society. Maybe that, and when I say maybe, this is what I personally believe, that he or she is actually playing a part in evolving the rest of humanity. We can look at a sociopath and we can go, "Oh, I never want to be like that," and we do this as a human species, do measurements. Okay, I know what I don't want to be like, but there's also a point where we have to let go of that, because as long as we hold on to, "I don't want to be like that, I need that measurement," that actually holds that paradigm or that energy field or that behavioral pattern in place. And I think that the trick is, once we're like, "Okay, I don't want to be like that," then we turn away from that and we focus on, "Oh, I do want to be like that." And so this again is the social evolution, or the personal evolution that happens in our behavior and in our responses and responsibility as human beings. Exactly.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things that I will often share with people, with audiences, is that, we all affect people in a lot of different ways, and sometimes it's because of our lousy example that people make positive changes in their life, and in the same way that because there are some people that have made a really positive impact in our lives because they were a real jerk and we made some positive choice as a result of that. So I don't know that it's structured, that the universe is structured that way or not. I don't think we can know, but I do know for a fact that that's the most inspiring, empowering way I can think about it. And so I agree with you completely that thinking about even sociopaths and psychopaths, or much less just the normal everyday of us, that sometimes we do things out of our instincts that harm others, to have the belief that that person can play a positive role. It's kind of like, it's the opposite of paranoia. Paranoia is the belief that the universe is out to get me. Yes. Well, a positive belief is that the universe is conspiring on my behalf. And I don't know whether that's in fact true. I don't think we could argue scientifically that it's true, but in terms of objective reality. But in terms of subjective reality, I think it absolutely is the most inspiring, empowering way to live one's life.
Yes. Wow.
And actually, you may not have not gotten to this part of my book or not. I don't know. But one of the things that I talk about in chapters 9 and 10 are evolutionary brain science and evolutionary psychology. And when we have an understanding of our evolved instincts, it's so empowering, because what it does is it helps us understand why we're tempted in certain ways, why we sometimes fall in certain ways, the things that we find challenging and problematic about ourselves and each other. Almost all of those things are grounded in human instincts. Humans have instincts like all other animals do, and yet we have mismatched instincts. In other words, our instincts aren't matched for the world that we today have to live in. Our instincts evolved to serve the survival and reproduction needs of our ancestors who live in a very different world.
Yes.
And having an appreciation, it's kind of like what you were just saying. It's like what you resist persists. And having appreciation for something about yourself that you used to judge about yourself frees up those patterns so that you can actually find it much easier to be in integrity, to stay in right relationship with reality, than when you're judging and condemning those aspects of yourself or other people, for that matter.
Yes. I love what you say about the survival piece. Yes, that we do have these instincts. Like our species the survival of our species needed to be ensured, and so I call them programs being in place. That there were actually programs put in place that are in every human being to ensure the survival of species. And one of these programs is what I call the fitting in program. And what the fitting in program is that we have this desire to fit in with each other. So it's like if we go back and we look at tribes, the first tribes, and civilizations that were here, that if people didn't have that fitting in instinct and everybody went off on their own, there would be less of a chance of survival. We have a greater chance of survival if we work together, if we stick together. And so we have these patterns that are fitting in patterns, and that means that we have the desire to fit in, and that if somebody's different, we ridicule them or make them feel bad, so then they'll want to fit in. We still see these patterns playing out in schools and institutions, and even with the census. It's like the census will tell you if you're normal and fit in or not. So it's like this fitting in or this normalcy program has actually been designed to ensure that we as a species would survive, and we've survived. Almost 7 billion people. We have definitely survived, and now that program, it's not necessary anymore. And in fact, the program that ensures survival, and there's other ones too, actually is hurting our survival, because now we have overpopulation, and we have people with worthiness issues, and people are afraid to go out and express themselves because they won't fit in, or they'll be ridiculed. And so now that program needs to be dropped, and I believe that that's what we're doing. Like this generation or these generations at this time are breaking that program, that you see so many people saying, okay, I want to express myself. I'm going to go against the norm. I'm going to, go do my own thing. And I'm afraid, I'm afraid of being criticized or ridiculed, but it's too painful not to be me. And so we see these people going out and doing their own thing. You're one of them. I'm one of them. We know tons of them. And what this does is it creates a whole new social patterns there. People are really being themselves. They're really expressing themselves, which is really how, and the only way that I believe that our planet can flourish from this point on, that we know how to work together. We know that, we've got enough people to do it, and now we get to be ourselves. And in being ourselves, this big puzzle kind of gets put together and fits, so that each person being themselves is actually supporting and co-creating the existence of humanity. And this, absolutely, I think, is so beautiful.
Amen. This is great. It's like you use different language and are saying the same thing that I've been sharing with audience. It's just so exciting to hear in such a different language. It's like I keep thinking, wow, that's such an insightful way to say it, and I've never said it that way or never even heard it said that way, and yet it's so right on.
Thank you.
Because it also becomes real personal. This is the thing. It's you're talking about in terms of a person's self-expression. It doesn't get much more personal than that. What is it that limits our self-expression? In terms of some of the things that people often find problematic about themselves, we all have cravings for sugar, salts, and fats, because for 99% of human history, it wasn't easy to find sugar, salts, and fats. So having a craving for those things allowed our ancestors to survive long enough to reproduce. Yet today, of course, it's very easy to find sugar, salts, and fats. Yet we still have these cravings. There's a mismatch.
Yes.
You know, it's like all of our ancestors, well, we all have ancestors that survived famine. You know, those that could store weight and keep that weight on through the harsh winters and the droughts and the lean times were, you know, survived. And those that couldn't do that didn't survive. And of course, you know, those ancestors were generous enough to pass those genes on to us. So there's this mismatch. Testosterone, one of the things we know about testosterone in men and women both, is that the higher the testosterone, the more people tend to think about sex and the more risks they take. And so, and the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that's concerned with good judgment or poor judgment, only develops between the age of 23 to 25. So it's not a surprise that young men under the age of 25 who have a lot of testosterone, so they're taking a lot of risks, and yet they don't have good judgment, it's not a surprise that they're, you know, so expensive to insure and they can't even rent cars. So having an understanding of our evolved nature, our evolved brain, our evolved instincts, just helps people lighten up about themselves. It helps people, as you just talked about, become self-expressive, to actually find their voice, find their gift, how they can be a unique blessing to the world. And it also helps us have more compassion for each other rather than judgment, in my experience.
Yes. Yes, beautifully said. Beautifully said. Yeah, it's a greater understanding. You know, it's really it's opening our minds to a greater knowledge, and in this knowledge of understanding, we can make different choices. If we know why we do things the way we do, suddenly there's a choice. Things are no longer so automatic. One of the tools that I love to use is I call it the show me. So it's like whenever I'm having a judgment about something or someone, I just say, show me. And what I'm doing is I'm asking the universe to show me a greater truth. And this is particularly, I do this with my clients a lot when there's something to be healed in the past. So let's say there's been an issue with a parent or, you know, an ex-spouse or something like that, and they're just like, this person did this to me and blah, blah, blah. And the show me technique really works. An example of it, so when I was 16, 17 years old, and my listeners have all probably heard this already, I was in a very abusive relationship and took many years to go through this, you know, forgiveness experience. And truly, you know, with forgiveness, if you still think like, oh, I forgave someone, you haven't, because you're still holding on to it. The forgiveness only is really, truly actualized when we get to this place of sheer gratitude, which is the opposite of of needing to forgive anything. And so I asked, show me what's the greater truth here. So what the truth looked like from my human, you know, immature perspective, it looked like that, you know, I met this boy, fell in love with him, ran away from home, moved in with him, and he beat me almost to my death and, you know, threw me out of moving cars and all this. That looked like, you know, the truth. But when I step back and I say, okay, show me a greater truth here, what I see then is that I had certain energetic patterns in me. And those energetic patterns were I was abusing myself. I felt unworthy. I felt, you know, not good enough. I felt that I deserved to be, you know, punished or abused in some ways. And he simply showed up and graciously demonstrated in my physical life what I was doing to myself. He demonstrated it in the outside world so that I would wake up and I would say, finally, luckily I did, you know, no more. I'm not going to be abused. And I got out of that and made a decision about my life and myself that I will never do that again, and went on this quest to really, you know, shift and heal things inside of me that created it. And so now when I look back on him, and there's no forgiveness. You know, if I was sitting across from him today, what I would say to him, I would say to him, Michael, oh, I am so sorry. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. And thank you, because you gave me the greatest gift. And the reason that I say please forgive me, because if I didn't have these energetic patterns to begin with, he wouldn't have to show up in some kind of, you know, cosmic agreement that we had and beat the life out of me so that I would wake up. And, you know, that must not have felt very good to him. So I am sorry. Please forgive me, and thank you. And that's the evolution.
Well, you know, it's so funny. I wish I could travel with you, because one of the things that I've been preaching on a lot lately is called evolutionize your life, the bliss of coming home to reality. And I outlined 4 things that are essential to coming into right relationship with reality, 4 things that are essential to evolutionizing your life. The first is learning your story, knowing your history, because that's, as we've been talking about, that's what transforms our relationship to past, present, and future. When we truly know where we've come from, that we are the universe becoming conscious of itself, that our bodies are literally made of stardust. That is the atoms that make us up, other than hydrogen, which was created right at the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang, or what Connie and I call the Great Radiance. But all the other atoms, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, all those atoms were forged inside stars that lived and died before our sun was born. So we are literally stardust. And so when people know their story, they know their history, they know the patterns. I don't mean know every single detail of evolutionary history. That's not what I'm talking about. But just knowing the basic patterns, like, for example, how chaos keeps catalyzing creativity. What that does is allows people to look to the future, first of all, to look to the present and then to the future, and to be inspired to be in action, but from a place of generosity. And that's the second thing, is to interpret life generously. And what you just modeled brilliantly is interpreting life generously. What you could have, and what 99% of the human population hearing your story would say you were completely legitimate in resenting him and continuing to resent him to this day, but you interpreted it generously, which not only transformed you and your feelings, but if you ever did have an interaction with him and came from that place of generosity, there's just no way it couldn't impact him positively. He'd probably bust into tears and realized, no, I was a schmuck. But he couldn't say that as long as he was defending himself from your resentment.
Right.
It's the power of generous interpretation. Mm-hmm. And you just modeled it great. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow.
Actually, I probably should finish the last 2 just so people know.
Yes, I was just going to say, what are the last 2?
So the first is to know your story, to learn your story, to learn that you are an expression of the whole, which does, as you said at the beginning, it makes this idea of oneness not just a spiritual idea or a metaphysical idea, but it's physically real. It's actually physically, naturally true. It's what Connie and I call the great story, the epic of evolution, the history of everyone and everything. It's sometimes called big history, but it's also the great story. And then interpret life generously, meaningfully and generously, because you don't have to. I mean, you can interpret things in a stingy way. You can interpret things in a self-centered way. But to interpret life meaningfully and generously is perhaps the most important skill that I wish I could impart to any teenager or any young person. The third is to honor our instincts. What we were talking about just a bit ago is when you can honor your instincts, the negative power of having mismatched instincts dissipates almost entirely. I mean, not entirely, but it makes it so much easier to be in integrity and to be in right relationship. And then the last is to be a blessing to others and to the world. And that's as simple as what we were talking about before in terms of expressing gratitude in a way that makes a difference, being of service in some way, and then especially following the path of what I call where your joy and the world's needs intersect. And I actually invite people to make a list, a long list on one side of a piece of paper of all the things that light them up, that turn them on, that give them joy and energy and happiness and so on, things that they're good at, things other people tell them that they're good at, etc. And then on the other side, to list all the places where they feel the world's needs, or their community's needs. Like, not just where they intellectually know about what's needed, but where they feel it. Where do they feel frustrated or depressed, and especially where they feel compassion, where their heart just breaks over something that's happening in the world. And then then I invite them to just pay attention to their heart. They don't even have to call it prayer or meditation if they don't want to. Just pay attention to your heart and to ask guidance from your own heart to see potential intersections. What you're doing is basically playing mix and match. Where are the intersections between what lights you up, what gives you joy, what gives you energy, and what the world's needs are, or your community's needs as you feel them. And those places of intersection where your joy and the world's needs intersect, that's your calling, that's your mission, that's where you can be a blessing to others in a way that also blisses you out. It's, Joseph Campbell talked about follow your bliss. Well, this is following your bliss, where your bliss is also a blessing to others. And those 4 things, I think, are essential characteristics of coming into right relationship with reality.
So learn your story.
Learn your story, right? The second is interpret life generously and meaningfully.
Mm-hmm. Honor instincts and be a blessing to the world.
Yeah, exactly. Being a blessing to others in the world. And again, part of being a blessing is when you honor your instincts, you no longer have guilt for the play. I mean, we've all left awake. I mean, all of us, by simply doing what's natural, by doing what's effortless, by doing what's instinctual, we've all left a wake. In other words, we've harmed people, we've disappointed people, we've betrayed people, we've done whatever, and we usually avoid cleaning that stuff up because we feel guilty about it.
Right.
But when we honor our instincts, we can appreciate the fact that if it weren't for the fact that our ancestors had the same instincts, we wouldn't be alive today. And so once we have appreciation rather than judgment for ourselves, then it makes it really easy to clean up stuff in the past and to go to somebody and say, hey, listen, I'm really sorry. I held this resentment towards you for all this time, or, the way you just did it was really quite extraordinary. But, the people in your life who you've in some way harmed. In fact, I did this in the course of writing my book because I wanted to make sure that I had really been current with everybody that I could think of, that I could remember. And there were a couple of people that all I could say was, I don't even expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I know what a schmuck I was. And I'm really, really sorry. If I could go back and do it differently, I really would. And that communication, boom, made a huge difference. We were reconciled. And in fact, they did forgive me, but it wasn't because I was asking them to forgive me. It just became natural. And so it's a great way to be a blessing to others is to simply take responsibility for the fact that you've left a wake, but not to do so from a place of self-judgment and condemnation, but from the place of, oh, of course, I was following my instincts. Duh.
Yeah. It's connecting to yourself. I think
Truly.
that many people...
And recognizing that your sense of self doesn't stop with your skin, that your sense of self, that they too are a part of the larger body of life, that we're all part of a larger body of life. And so to love them, to accept them, to forgive them, to, take, responsibility for the fact that, oh gosh, I just thought of something. Years ago, I remember a teacher said that if you want magic to occur in any relationship, where there used to be closeness, where there used to be love, where there used to be affinity, and there's now not, for whatever reason. He said, you can perform magic, and it's very simple. It's to do the opposite of what we instinctually do, which is what we instinctually do is we blame them for everything that didn't or doesn't work in the relationship. We take credit for everything that did or does work in the relationship. And, of course, they're doing the same thing, so it's not a surprise that we're estranged. If you do the opposite of that, which is you give them 100% credit for everything that did or does work in the relationship, you take 100% responsibility for everything that didn't or doesn't work in the relationship, and then just shut up and watch what happens. And I've never in my life seen that, in my own life and with others who have actually done that, seen that not perform magic.
That is magic. That is beautiful. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And again, that's part of what it is to come in right relationship with reality. It's really part of getting right with God. See, that's the thing. People have spiritualized God. They think of God as, a supreme landlord up there, out there somewhere. And to recognize that God is nothing less than a sacred name or a proper name or a personification of reality with a capital R. And so when we heal our relationships, when we clean up, when we clean up the environment, when we live in right relationship, when we use less water, we are being in right relationship with God. I mean, the idea that I can praise and worship God, with my hands up to the heavens, and then treat others in a disrespectful way or trash the environment, I'm totally out of touch with reality. No matter what, no matter how many times I read the Bible or go to church.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's about taking responsibility for everything. So it's for me, it's not just about taking responsibility for my actions. It's about taking responsibility for everything. And so if somebody's treating me in ways that don't feel good, I'm responsible for that. That there's something inside of me that's creating that. Otherwise, it wouldn't be happening. I think that relationships have problems because we believe that someone owes us something. Like the other person is responsible for meeting our needs. So two people fall in love, they, get married, whatever. And, suddenly, at first it's all magical because these two people are, fulfilling each other's needs, but suddenly, real life comes into play. And, my husband or my lover or whatever, and he's not loving me the way I think I should be loved and my definition of love, which is different than his. And suddenly, I'm looking to get that need met. So I'm changing my behavior to get that need met. I'm not getting that need met. And now I'm blaming him because I'm feeling inadequate. And this is what creates the distance. But if I can look at that and say, okay, what is this really telling me about myself? Where am I out of integrity with myself? And I just look inside and I realign myself and get back in integrity with myself and take responsibility for everything that happens and not blame him. then suddenly he shifts because the dynamic has changed.
Exactly.
It only takes one person to change a relationship. The interesting thing, too, is that as soon as we blame someone else, what we're really doing is giving our power away. So for everyone that we blame in our lives, we've given a bit of our energy to. So someone we 20 years ago, someone, did us wrong and we're still blaming them. We haven't forgiven them. What we're really doing is actually energetically giving them a piece of us and staying connected there. And it's not until we let go, take responsibility, forgive, give back to whatever, that we can become whole again. And this is the true healing. That is, as long as we're blaming somebody, we're giving our power away, and we experience ourselves as less than whole. So it really is about being responsible.
Exactly. Well, I mean, you are truly a master of interpreting life generously and responsibly, and that will transform that will transform relationships. It just does.
Yes. Yes, it is magic. It is magic. Yes, all around, it's possible to make magic and create miracles every single day. And it's not outside of ourselves. It's inside of ourselves. The magic happens inside of ourselves, right? Right,
exactly. And when I talk to science types, people who are really empirical, humanist science types, I don't even try to argue that what you were just articulating, I don't even try to argue that that's the truth, like in an objective, measurable, scientific way. But I do say, it can be empirically shown that that's a really useful way to live. It's a really empowering, inspiring, useful way to live. And that's pretty much unarguable because, I mean, when you live with that kind of a mindset, I speaking for myself, I live with that kind of a mindset. And I love my life. I don't have to die to go to heaven. I experience heaven every moment. I mean, my life, even when challenges occur, I think, okay, what's possible now? Here's what's real. Okay, this is what's real. What's possible now? And so staying in the place of possibility rather than fear or judgment or condemnation or whatever, it's like, okay, what's possible now? And even in my relationship with my wife, Connie's never done a self-help program. She's never done, she just has no interest in personal growth or healing. And yet our relationship is at a 10 on a scale of 0 to 10 almost all the time. We're at 9.9, and most of the time we're at 10. And it's simply because I've taken 100% responsibility for making sure that we stay there. Yes. And I've calibrated to her to where we naturally have a few tools that I talk about in chapters 11 and 12 of my book. In fact, if any of your listeners, if they read any of my book at all, I say just read chapters 11 and 12. They're just basically practical exercises of how to be in right relationships such that all your relationships thrive. And one of the patterns is to take responsibility for making sure that the relationship stays at that place. And then having a few communication tools that allow each person to be heard so that you could get to that place. So Connie never carries resentment. She never carries bitterness. She never carries anything. So we're always in this place of juicy, heartful, playful, goofy love.
That sounds beautiful. Oh, Michael, you are so amazing.
Well, so are you. I'm just amazed at this conversation because even though you've used a lot of different language, clearly you are coming from what I call the place of deep integrity, evolutionary integrity. And I'm heartened because it's not like you got there from having a deep understanding of our evolutionary history. You've gotten there through your own study of psychology and spirituality and that sort of thing, your own path. So I'm very heartened by this because what that suggests to me that there's a lot of other people that are coming to similar territory, to similar understandings from a variety of different avenues.
Yes. Absolutely, because it's available now. All we have to do is just open up and ask for it. That's all. Show me, and the universe will. The universe will, and it will show you to the degree that you're willing to drop old beliefs and old thought patterns. It just wants to teach us. Michael, this has been such an amazing show. Would you believe we only have a couple of minutes left, and I want you to be able to. I know, but you're coming back on the show. I still want you to, so I hope
I'd be thrilled. I'll tell you what, Nanice, I can promise you that I would love to have a conversation with you whenever. I do want to say this one thing, though, because the topic was the evolution of God or something like that. And, many people, especially in California, but other people, progressive people as well, use the phrase the universe. They talk about the universe this or the universe that. And the way that we use the universe is the way that ancient people said God. In other words, it's talking about reality as a whole. And when we think that reality is conspiring on our behalf, when we think that God loves us, it makes a difference in our lives. And when we serve God by being in right relationship, we are about the evolution of our concepts of the divine. It's the evolution of God that we're all participating in.
Yes. Yes. Extraordinary. Extraordinary. So, Michael, how can people get in touch with you? Can you give your website, and how can they get your book and all that good stuff?
Yeah, well, sure. My main website is thankgodforevolution.com. That's my book website, but there's actually three websites. Thankgodforevolution.com is the one connected to my book, and I think one of the reasons why my book was endorsed by 6 Nobel Prize-winning scientists, as well as by theologians and priests and rabbis and across the spectrum, is that it really does give voice to this bridge-building science and religion perspective. So thankgodforevolution.com. And then the main one, in terms of the first aspect of evolutionizing your life, which is learning your story, is our website called thegreatstory.org. And it's just got so much videotapes and, video clips and things for kids and adults. It's just an educational tool. Everything there is for free. And it's just designed to help people come to a deeper knowledge, not just belief, but knowledge of their story and who they are and where they came from and why, just all those kinds of things. So those would be the two main websites, which is thankgodforevolution.com and thegreatstory.org. And then I also have michaeldowd.org.
And Dowd is D-O-W-D.
D-O-W-D. Michael Dowd, yes. D-O-W-D, right?
Michael, thank you so much for joining me today. This was an extraordinary conversation. I totally enjoyed it, and I can't wait until the next time we share chai.
Thank you. And our itinerary there as well, because we travel all over North America, so we'd love to speak.
When you come to Salt Lake City, you and I have a coffee date. So
happy to. I'd be thrilled to, actually.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I love you, Michael. You have
a
great evening,
and
I'll talk to you
soon.
This is a delight. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yes. God really does love you. God loves you. We forget that. We think sometimes that life is conspiring against us, but though that is not true. God, the universe, is conspiring on your behalf, allowing you, empowering you to wake up every single moment of the day. And it's time. It's time that we all wake up to the wonderment and beauty and love of who we really are and who each other really are. So today I invite you to drop down into your heart, take a deep breath, and remember that you truly are love, and you truly are loved. Please visit me on my website at nanice.com. That's NANICE.com for all my show archives, tons of articles, free books, free songs, and a whole bunch of other stuff to empower you in your awakening. And I also like to mention that today's show was sponsored by Echo House Publishing, ECKOHousepublishing.com, the revolutionary way to publish your book. And I should also mention that this is my publishing company, so it is an amazing, amazing business, and love to help you publish your book and maybe get you on the show as well. Sending you so much love. Have a great, great week, and I will talk to you next week. Can't wait. Bye for now.
Thank you for having chai with Nanice. Please go to www.nanice.com for great free stuff that will empower you to live your best possible life. Free books, articles, shows, meditation audios, and so much more at Nanice.com. That's NANICE.com. Nanice's books are also available in all major bookstores and Amazon. Check out The Infinite Power of You, Even Gandhi Got Hungry and Buddha Got Mad, Zest Point, Lip Prints, and many others by Nanice Ellis. To find out about one-on-one coaching and how Nanice can personally coach you to experience your best life possible, please email mybestlife@nanice.com.
If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And please join me on my website at nanice.com. That's NANICE.com. Thank you.